Hello, denizens. I know I confuse many of you who visit this channel. Am I an Apple nerd? A Hackintosh guru? A science nut? What are these odd references to the Frantics comedy troupe and being a comedian? Yes, all of that is true. My most recent tribute to Norm Macdonald confused people even more because I referenced having known Norm, Jim Carrey, and others. Who is this tech guy who has hobnobbed with the famous? I've also had the pleasure of speaking at length with Michael Palin, Todd Rundgren, and Muhammad Ali. I also employed two of the kids in the hall when they were desperate for cash. What would have happened if they had died of starvation? Let me tell you about my showbiz aspirations and why I drifted away from that trajectory. Get ready for stories and philosophical meanderings. If any of you want a life in showbiz, then you should pull up a stool and watch this for worthless advice that you can freely ignore. Where to start? Okay, first of all, I'm not complaining. Yes, I was a victim of circumstances. The cancellation of our TV show was a huge disappointment, which did help me choose the path that I took. Well, eventually took. We all love stories of people who left their bike courier job, auditioned for a movie role, got it, and subsequently rocketed to stardom. I find those stories worthless because that is not how it happens for most actors. And for that matter, you can throw in writers, musicians, singers, dancers, and directors. Anyone in the creative field. Honing your skills for 10 years, then landing a great role that launches your career is way more realistic and still only fractionally more probable. It's a tough, bloody business. Of the hundreds of sketch performers in Toronto performing in the 80s, only a few of us broke through independent of the Second City machine. The Frantics was one of them. But failure was barely a thought in our youthful, fevered brains. Even when our parents asked, why don't we get a real job? In my Hungarian Jewish mother's case, sobbing uncontrollably. When I started out in comedy with Rick Green as part of a two-person comedy troupe, when my parents saw us for the first time, my dad asked, "Can you get help from Alan King?" The "you gotta be bad before you're good" thing, I'm not going to cover here. Rick, Peter, Dan, and I had an insatiable desire to make people laugh. Most performers are happy when they can make money from the craft that they love. Latching onto a success that takes you beyond your expectations often makes actors reluctant passengers. We're not really mentally built for too much success. The empathy that a performer has and the cruelty of success, well, it can be a toxic combo. The business of fame is very different from the business of acting. We've all heard that. The show part of show business wants your celebrity. Exploit your celebrity. The business part just wants you to remember your lines, hit your marks, and take its percentage. But one thing that most performers have in common is failure. For no other reason than we experience more of it than most occupations. We fail at auditions. We fail when a live show bombs, a TV pilot that never gets picked up, a movie that tanks. It's one of the reasons I got out of the business. not because I was afraid of failure. I got tired of talking about failure. Failure builds up a lot of psychological scar tissue because of the amount of effort and commitment creating failures requires. I don't know if it makes performers tougher. That's an adage that I don't think applies here. It certainly makes you vulnerable, mainly because it's rarely under your control. You're just a hired piece in the bigger puzzle. It's not like running your own business where you can actually learn from your failures. A stand-up, perhaps, is the exception. A stand-up can learn from their mistakes. Okay, getting back to why I got out of show business. After our TV show, 4 on the Floor, was canceled, we had one fantastic sold-out theater run with our History of the World production, The Frantics Walk Upright. After 10 years together, we decided to end on a high note. Sure, we could have ground out a live career playing all the libraries in Canada, but it's not much of a life. I joined the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation in '89, became head of TV comedy in '90, blew through a bunch of taxpayer money creating several failed shows, and quit in '91. At my last executive meeting at CBC, I told everyone at the boardroom table that it was a great 3 years, but it was time for me to return to the creative community. Not a single laugh. Tough crowd. So I went to LA and interviewed for a job as a VP of development at Paramount. It went very well, I thought, but it was an incident in the Polo Lounge at the Beverly Hills Hotel that changed the direction of my life. I was having drinks with a disgruntled Canadian expat, an NBC producer. Everyone is disgruntled in Hollywood. Disgruntled is the main operating condition. If you're having success, no one appreciates what you've done for them. And if you're not working, you're disgruntled for not being treated better for your past successes. Anyway, while we were sharing disgruntled stories over some kind of expensive cocktails, Cher walked in. We were close to the entrance, and she startled me. I turned and reflexively said, "Hi, Cher," in a much too friendly a tone. Cher, not knowing who the fuck I was, must have got the sense that she should know me. She touched my shoulder and gave me the kind of high that only friends get. And then she walked to her table. Well, the place went silent. Eyes turned to me, gave me the once-over, before going back to their noisy conversations about disgruntlement. But people suddenly started stopping by our table, asked me my name. They gave me their cards, then gave me the call me mime. I had usurped some of Cher's aura. More accurately, I had stolen it and bestowed upon myself a few minutes of attractiveness. I decided right then and there that I couldn't handle that kind of existence. Went back to my room, phoned Air Canada, and booked the red-eye back to Toronto. A couple of months later, I started a digital new media company, the Digital Soup Company, which was pretty radical at the time and super creative. I just didn't have the right kind of drive to sustain a high-level Hollywood career. It was not a hard decision. Tapping into my inner nerd resulted in a long and lucrative career that I'm also pretty sure saved my marriage. But showbiz is a strange, addictive beast once it's in your system. There's this great joke about a guy who goes into the Universal Studios washroom and finds the 90-year-old former head of the studio cleaning toilets. And he asks him, "Aren't you Sid Siderman? You shouldn't be cleaning toilets here. You should be retired on a Greek island." Whereby Sid responds, "What? And leave show business?" So If you're asking me, do I miss performing? Yes. I would be lying if I said otherwise. I miss collaborating with a team of creative people. I love directing and writing. I loved sitting in Norm Peterson's chair in the empty Cheers set. I loved learning how to light a sitcom, but I don't miss the capricious nature of the business. When I was with the CBC, I went down to LA for the Ace Cable Awards. No one cared I was there. That didn't bother me. But then again, no one cared about Michael Palin either. He was there nominated for his Around the World in 80 Days series. Luckily, as a huge Python fan, I had him all to myself and had just a great time. He was absolutely charming. And poor Pamela Stevenson from Not the 9 O'Clock News was with Palin, arguably one of the biggest celebrities in the UK at the time, but here she was, invisible. She was also very nice. And you know who else was being ignored? This guy sitting at the table next to mine. His name was Muhammad Ali. You might recognize the name. He was alone, save for a couple of bodyguards. I thought, oh, poor lonely guy. Why shouldn't I talk to him? I got up to say hi. Ali waved those two hulking men aside, and I had about 10 minutes with him. Unbelievably charming and funny, and apparently in the down trough of his fame cycle. One day you can be starring in MASH, and the next you're doing dinner theater in Mississauga, Ontario. Do I miss getting my makeup done by a gay man who was Craig Russell's dresser? Hell yes, because the stories were fantastic and he treated me wonderful. But what I really miss, and I know it can never be relived, is encountering like-minded, talented people, committed to being funny, not making any money, yet still being able to keep going because we were young, stupid, and could live on next to nothing. Most of us have had that experience or similar, and it happens only once. And it's a glorious time. But when you turn 30, you pick up responsibilities, obligations. Hopefully, you find your groove by then. One thing I did learn is that American actors want to be famous, British actors want to act, and Canadian actors just want to eat. And if you're wondering what I'm doing to satisfy my creative urges, why, this, darlings, be seeing you.